different cities from 3 different parts of India, but they've collaborated on this project. Lovely to see this, and welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Sujita. A very good evening to everyone present here. Today, Prisha, Aishi, and I will be providing everyone an insight about the LGBTQ movement through this presentation. Hope you enjoy. Over to Prisha.
So today we're going to be talking about the LGBTQ movement, and that mainly concerns and the LGBTQ movement, the social movement. When we're discussing this movement, we're concerned with two things, that is sexuality, sexual orientation, as well as gender identity. So both of these are really important parts of our social identities. Sexual identity basically defines what gender or what people we're attracted to, while our gender identity describes what gender role we choose to play in society. Both are social constructs, and gender should not be confused with biological sex, that is the genitals that you are born with. Before we move on to the LGBTQ society, the LGBTQ movement in the community, we need to understand the nature of society as it is now. And the nature of society is inevitably heteronormative and cisnormative. Explaining these terms, heteronormative basically describes a society where heterosexuality, or the sexuality of a person being attracted to the opposite gender, is normalized, is considered the norm. And cisnormativity is where people identifying with the sex they were born as, the gender they were assigned at birth according to the sex, the genitals they were born with. Cisgender basically means when you identify with the gender that you were assigned with at birth based on your sex. So however, we have always been led to believe, ever since the day we were born, we've grown up with the idea that heterosexuality is the norm and cisgender, gender is binary. However, that is not true for all human beings. In fact, sexuality and gender both are fluid in nature, and that is what the LGBTQ movement is all about. So what is LGBTQIA plus, QIAP plus, right? The LGBTQIA plus P plus community stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, aromantic, pansexual, etc., etc. It is a short acronym given to a community of people that chooses to identify as not cisgender or heterosexual, away from the norm. So however, this acronym does not include all sexualities, all gender identities. And while we go through this PPT and we describe through this presentation, we need to keep this in mind, that this acronym, this movement does not include all sexualities and genders, and this acronym does not represent the entire community as a whole. So moving on to our next slide, that is the LGBTQ plus movement. Just a second. Right. So the LGBTQ plus movement basically has various aims. It is very obviously at first glance a movement for equality, a movement for equality in rights, legal equality. However, as a social movement, it also strives for social equality, self-acceptance, liberation, social, and various other aims. It depends on what wing you are in. So basically, homophobia is hostility towards the LGBTQ community, or people who identify as something different from the norm. And homophobia, while a lot of us believe is something that has been a part of our culture since the very beginning, homophobia is actually a colonial practice, and all laws in India that banned homosexuality at a point of time were brought by colonizers from Britain, right? So the LGBTQ movement itself started out as advocacy for same-sex relationships, but over time, it has gradually shifted its focus from same-sex relationships towards gender identities, and placing equalities towards to all gender identities, and allowing transgender people to identify as the gender they want to. while still acknowledging different sexualities in the process. There were many preceding movements to the LGBTQ plus movement, such as the homophile movement or the gay liberation movement, but all of these eventually merged into the LGBTQ plus movement, or the Pride movement as we know it. These queer initiatives and themes and ideas are often discussed in a lot of other social movements, such as feminism, and often clash with other social discourses like race, disability. We will be discussing that forward when we discuss intersectionality. Now, moving forward, I'm going to be talking about the major milestones in the LGBTQ movement. Obviously, the LGBTQ movement did not just start out in its own. There were many factors that led to it. One of the most important ones that is really important in the history of the LGBTQ plus movement is the Stonewall Riots. It marked the beginning of the gay rights movement as we know it today. It started when the police raided a public spot a public spot on June 29, 1969 in New York City. It is often marked as the beginning of the LGBTQ movement because of the retaliation it got. It started off the Pride movement, and Brenda Howard, she's known as the mother of Pride. She is an advocate for bisexual rights, and she is credited towards putting the first Pride rally after the Stonewall Riots. The Pride flag was created in 1978 by the artist Gilbert Baker. It is the rainbow flag it has all the 7 colors of a rainbow. Why they chose the rainbow color is often discussed. It is considered that the rainbow color represents diversity, or represents the spectrum of sexuality and the spectrum of gender. Right. So then we have AIDS awareness campaigns that was formed in 1987. Same-sex marriage is legal in about 29 countries now. Netherlands was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage. However, it is important to remember that while it is legal in a lot of countries such as India have still not legalized same-sex marriage, and the capital punishment for same-sex marriage or same-sex relationship or homosexuality in a lot of countries is the death sentence. So we are nowhere near reaching equal rights for the LGBTQ community. The largest Pride parade in the world happened in Sao Paulo, that is Brazil, and June is often credited to be the Pride month, that is celebrating the month of celebrating the LGBTQ movement and its history and the richly diverse community. Personally, on my behalf, I am an advocate. I advocate for LGBTQ rights in whatever way I can. In my school, my classmates and I try to impart whatever knowledge we can gain through our school magazine that discusses topics of race and feminism and LGBTQ rights, etc. Moving on to Ayushi. Ayushi, would you like to take over now? Ayushi?
Yes, thank you, Prisha. Yeah. Could you move the slide? Okay. So very good evening. This is Ayushi going to talk about the LGBTQ movement. The first slide here shows me what are TERFs. So what do you think TERFs are? Here in the definition set by Google is trans-exclusionary radical feminists refer to feminists who exclude trans women from their feminism movement. They claim to be gender critical and present an anti-trans agenda. It has fallen out of the mainstream feminist movement that support and advocate for all women's rights, cis and trans. This is a definition which has been proposed by the international governing bodies. Next, here we talk about Kimberly Crenshaw, an American professor of law who coined the term in 1989, explained intersectional feminism as a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality can often operate together and exacerbate each other. An intersectional approach shows that people's social identities can overlap creating compounding experiences of discrimination. Intersectionality helps focus on racial, gender, religious, cultural implications of LGBTQ oppression. The next slide, please. So the Indian history of LGBTQ. We've been living in India for a very long time. What do you think the scenario is here? Is it very favorable for them or is it a bit hostile? Homosexuality was a huge part of India. It was represented in the walls of the temples and Sanskrit religious sources such as Manusmriti and Shikhandi, or even the chapter of Kama Sutra of Vatsyayana. The ancient Indian text Kama Sutra, written by Vatsyayana, dedicates a complete chapter on homosexuality. So you can see how enriched our culture was with the idea. India's trans women community, or the Hijra, has been part of the subcontinent for about as long as civilization has. With a recorded history of over 4,000 years and about as long as civilization has, is being mentioned in the ancient text. The Hijra community is a testament to the sexual diversity that is integral yet often forgotten in the Indian culture. During the British rule, so what do you think must have happened? Homosexual intercourse was considered unnatural and was declared a criminal offense under Chapter 16, Section 277 of the Indian Penal Code. The next slide. So, the attitude of a person depends on their mindset. What do you think is the attitude of LGBTQ towards in India? Although homosexuality wasn't illegal in ancient India, it was looked upon. It was looked down upon, it was outcasted. It was not treated very well. It was not even welcomed. What happened was that it existed as a crime. The criminal perception against it was introduced with colonization. Keeping aside the legal aspect of LGBTQ movement, India hasn't neared a phase of social acceptance for the homosexual or the trans community. People who identify as a label to the LGBTQ spectrum in India have to face discrimination and violence at their workplace and even in their strangers. Among the strangers, they have been looked with a cold eye. Homosexual women are subject to the violence and rape. These factors cause people to keep their identities hidden and even contribute to suicide. It is imperative to provide India's LGBTQ youth with better access to the mental health facilities. So it depends on the individual how we take it in, not on the government or the society or what somebody else tells me. The next slide, please. So here I'm talking about the LGBTQ movement in India. After independence on 26 November 1949, the right of equality was implemented under the Article 14, but homosexuality remained a criminal offense. Decades later, the first known protest for gay rights was conducted. It happened in 1992, so you can measure out how late we were in identifying. In 1919, Calcutta hosted India's first gay pride parade. In 2009, a landmark Delhi High Court decision in the Nas Foundation of the NCT of Delhi case held the treating homosexual between adults as a crime. In the Suresh Kumar Kaushal and other Nas Foundation, others in case 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the Delhi High Court. In August 2017, the Supreme Court upheld the right to privacy as a fundamental right under the Constitution in the landmark of Putswami judgment. Lastly, the battle against Section 377 has ended, but the bigger battle for the equal rights of the LGBTQ community is still ongoing. India has still not legalized same-sex marriage. India's transaction bills have received the backlash from the trans communities. And also, its allies require surgeries for gender conversion on the official document. So India, as you can see, is lagging behind in the movement. Next slide, please.
Aditya, would you like to take over now?
Yeah. Thank you, Aishi. Um, Furthermore, there are three topics that I would be addressing here. At first, the topic of business and how pinkwashing is on the rise, and finally, on how to support and ensure the growth of legitimate LGBTQ plus owned businesses. As mentioned earlier, you might be wondering what the term pinkwashing means. Well, it refers to when a company markets themselves as gay friendly just for the company's benefit. This is usually seen across the world during the month of June, Pride Month. There are always ways to identify pinkwashing in companies so that we don't have to fall into the elaborate marketing scheme. Here are some ways. Brands changing their logos on social media to rainbow colored only during the month of June. Brands also using social media to highlight LGBTQ plus employees or team members only during the month of June, as well as brands selling capsule collections of Pride merchandise only during the month of June. Stores and or brands hanging rainbow flags in their locations during the month of June. During Pride Month, brands highlight the LGBTQ community in the marketing material, like clothing ads. If a business does not fall under these categories, it is legitimate, and we should support its steady growth. Most of these legitimate companies are small, and they need help building up. Instead of spending on money on buying goods from big companies with their fraudulent support the LGBTQ, we could buy our goods from small LGBTQ owned businesses. Moreover, there are many queer, transsexual, and members of the LGBTQ being harassed by their fellow employees or the company they work in just because they're different. This is a huge problem. The people being harassed have no voice in the company they work in. It will drive a person insane to work under these conditions. If by any chance you witness this harassment taking place, stand up for the discriminated against and report the issue to the company or higher authorities. I'll be explaining more on how to support these people from being discriminated against and harassed in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. Oh yeah. One in five LGBT people have experienced verbal bullying from customers and service users or colleagues because of their sexual orientation in the past 5 years. 1 in 8 LGBT people said they would not feel confident reporting homophobic harassment in the workplace. A quarter of the LGBTQ people said that they have personally experienced poor treatment or bullying from colleagues in the workplace in the past 5 years due to sexual orientation. More than 1/3 of LGBT people have hidden or disguised that they are LGBT at work in the last year because they were afraid of discrimination. I personally have experienced harassment and bullying from people around me. I'm straight, but I'm not white. I grew out of it and started performing well in sports and academics to gain respect from others. But imagine if I was not a heterosexual. Society would look down on me. I would not get a chance to prove myself in sports, And without any extracurricular activities, I would have no motivation to open a book and study. This is hypothetical, but for most people around the world, this is their reality. The pressure society puts on each one of us is nothing compared to the members of the LGBTQ. Due to this many reasons, people develop psychological problems. It is our duty as the new generation of this world to shift societal norms to benefit each and every one of us, rather than focusing on only one only profiting one side. An open-minded approach to every situation and the act of kindness to every individual is essential for creating a better environment for all of us. Finally, I will be explaining about the most important key to unlock a safe society and environment for all. An ally of the LGBTQ is any person who is straight that supports the cause by standing up against homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. Here are some ways you can be an ally and support the people in need. Anti-LGBTQ comments and anti-gay slurs comments are jokes are harmful. Let your friends, family, and co-workers know that you find them offensive, and other people find it offensive as well. Confront your own prejudice and bias, even if it's uncomfortable to do so. Be open-minded. Defend your LGBT friends against discrimination. Believe that all people, regardless of gender identity, and sexual orientation, should be treated with dignity and respect. If you see LGBT people being harassed or being victim to verbal abuse, stand up for them and ask the abuser to stop and involve the police or any higher authority. Show young people that they can be authentic around you. Be open-minded and kind. Stay informed and get involved in fights ahead. With this, I end my presentation. Is it possible if I can ask everyone over here a question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
It's nothing difficult and not big. It's does anyone over here know what the word pride in Pride Month stands for? The word pride is an acronym for a couple of words. Does anyone know what it is? The P in Pride Month, the R in Pride Month. Yeah, Ananya, that was good. Yeah, that's right. That's the right answer. The Pride in Pride Month stands for personal rights in defense and education. Thank you. Aish.
Right. So thanks to all of you, and with this thought in mind, our team would like to conclude this presentation. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and we hope that we've incited some sort of thought in all of your minds, all of the people who took out time to listen to us. I also read a question in the chat, someone asking how the legal aspects do not obviously mean social acceptance, that equality before law does not always equal to social acceptance. That's what the question was, and I completely agree. While homosexuality was the Article 377 was revoked in the Indian Constitution, same-sex marriage is still not legal in India. other than that, social acceptance is we're nowhere near social acceptance towards the LGBTQ community in India. And I think it is important to realize that this can only be changed through awareness. And that's what we're doing here. We're creating awareness here as we speak about it. And I think LGBTQ should not be such a taboo topic just because it's related to sexuality or gender identity. It should be discussed with kids. Most of the people in the LGBTQ community realize that they're a different sexual orientation or gender identity by the age of 12. That obviously doesn't mean that it cannot be earlier or later in life, but on an average, it happens around the age of 12. So it is essential to realize that this is not a topic that for adults, or it is not an adult topic or a topic that is only discussed with young adults. It is something that needs to be normalized at a very young age. When we watch Disney movies, when we watch movies around us with heterosexual relationships, then we can very obviously normalize homosexual, same-sex relationships and other gender identities as well. We need to teach that to kids and spread awareness at a very young age. That's how we change society.